if we get this MEV issue and now only the biggest pools can mine a competitive block template because they hire the best quants, the solutions we had are totally impossible. I think if we end up where Ethereum is today, we have lost. There was no point in this Bitcoin thing.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm so good. We haven't really gotten a chance to like chat. I met you sort of off the cuff by the stroke of luck at Bitcoin Plus Plus in Texas. What do you think of Bitcoin Plus Plus in Texas, by the way? What do you think of like the energy of that conference, like relative?
It was good. I mean, it was obviously a very exciting time to be talking about MEVPool policy and MEVPool generally.
Some drama going on.
Lisa really timed it pretty well. But it was good. I thought it was a good crowd, a good set of people. Good, there was a lot of very interesting conversations. Yeah,
we're going to talk a little bit about MEV at some point. You gave a talk on sort of MEV, which I think is something, and I'm curious if you agree with this, that Bitcoiners specifically don't think about that much.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, would you? It sounds like you're kind of like maybe trying to like sound the alarm there, and we can get into more detail. I spend a lot of time sort of the meta protocol space, as I mentioned at the conference, and those folks definitely think it's coming to Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah. They're convinced.
They're convinced. Yeah, exactly. So, we'll see what happens. But let's sort of like contextualize this chat a little bit. It's a treat to have you. I'm curious to learn a little bit about like kind of your personal history getting into Bitcoin. You were pretty young when you got into Bitcoin.
Yeah. So I've been working on open source Bitcoin for 14 and change years, going on 15 early next year.
It's a long time.
It's been a minute.
Wait, so that means 2010 you were contributing?
2011, beginning of 2011.
Were you in high school?
I was in high school.
ChatGPT told me you were in high school.
I was in high school. It's kind of scary that ChatGPT knows that about me. That's pretty frightening, actually.
I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, that's scary. I feel like I should be filing a lawsuit or something. Anyway, yes, I was finishing high school at the time
in 2010,
early 2011.
In 2011,
mid 2011 is when I started working on Bitcoin Core.
How the hell did you? Okay, back up. How did you discover Bitcoin in high school?
Right. In 2011, I mean, I was into computers. I was a geek, whatever. In 2011, Bitcoin made the front page of Slashdot, which was Reddit before Dig was Reddit.
Okay.
So it was the kind of a similar kind of the front page of the internet kind of vibe, link sharing site where people submitted links, whatever, upvotes. It was a lot more kind of technologists on there, and it made the front page of Slashdot 2 or 3 or 4 times in early 2011, late 2010. And so there were a bunch of people who followed Slashdot closely who got involved around that time. I happened to see it on a podcast that I think learned about it from Slashdot. So there was a little bit of buzz in kind of early 2011, and there was definitely a spike in activity in early to mid 2011.
Did you think it was just like technically interesting, or were you like into the like ethos? Like, what about Bitcoin interested you?
Yes. All of the above, kind of. I mean, it was certainly technically very interesting. It was, it was super early, right? So it was very beta. There was no like, oh, we're going to replace the world's currency. This is going to like completely take over the world. It's like, okay, maybe in like a pipe dream. Like it wasn't
kind
serious.
Of
on the roadmap.
Yeah.
It's not that it wasn't serious, but it was not going to be that big. It wasn't going to like take over the world. That was like crazy, right? We weren't going to have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 person conferences for it. That would be insane. Yet here we are. But it was this like fascinating idea that we could write code that had money, that we could exchange value with each other, that was purely backed in the code we were writing,
right?
And not backed by anything else. We're not trusting someone else to intermediate this transaction. We're just writing code and transacting with each other, and that's it.
And in high school, even you like understood that to be like completely a revolutionary thought.
I don't know how much I understood it to be revolutionary, but I certainly found it to be fascinating. I was like, wow, that's really cool that we could build something like that. And like, I want to, get into this. I want to like hang out and like meet people on IRC and chat with people and see what people are talking about it. And very quickly I found some really brilliant people who worked on Bitcoin, Greg Maxwell, Peter Willa, some of these folks who had been engineers for a long time. I mean, I didn't know anything. I was a kid.
Right.
But I quickly got in with these folks, and they were just hanging out on IRC, talking to each other, and having access to really smart people to learn from them at that age too was really fascinating. It
I
was really
just learned
cool.
about IRC. That's like where I'm at. Somebody else who I interviewed this week was like, "Oh yeah, the Wizards chat on IRC. Like that was the alpha."
Right.
And that went on for like years and years.
Yeah.
Is this still happening?
It still exists. It's pretty dead.
Not really.
Not really, yeah.
Okay. So but back then that was like the place, and
Yeah.
like it was like the core
There's still like the
developers.
Bitcoin Core developer chat room is still fairly active, but it's really focused on stuff in Bitcoin Core. It's not. There's like the Wizards chat was very like, let's talk about very meta future Bitcoin ideas that were crazy and off the wall and whatever. And a lot of the stuff we're building now got invented back then in that chat.
In the Wizards chat.
Yeah, where people were just throwing around ideas, and now
Any
now it's pretty
notable
dead. But
any notable like major things that you remember being ideated on in the Wizards chat?
yeah, I mean, it's been too long. I don't know that I would have any great examples for you, but certainly that was kind of where all the people hung out who were thinking about building cool stuff on Bitcoin.
And there were some cool conferences happening back then, right? I mean, you were like loosely involved with scaling Bitcoin at one point or no?
Yeah, I kind of helped organize the Montreal one, which
Okay.
was the first one, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't do a lot for it, but I kind of helped organize a little bit.
Okay. So you kind of were just like it was this I mean, I guess it was just like such a small group of people who were involved in these things. Everyone kind of just like helped each other out make these things happen. Is that sort of the energy of that
Yeah,
time?
kind of. I mean, boy, running a conference is a lot of work. But most people knew each other. Certainly, I mean, even today, most of the devs know each other. But
Right.
back then, certainly everyone worked fairly closely together because there wasn't a huge group of people.
Okay, so you're basically you're like in late high school and you're just sort of like, playing around basically with like the
Yeah.
Bitcoin chats and like, whatever else you're doing. When did you feel like you were starting to, I mean, I guess you were making core contributions pretty quickly thereafter?
Yeah, in mid 2011, a few months later, I was writing code for Bitcoin. I mean, I didn't know C++, I didn't know C, I didn't know what a pointer was. I mean, I was real green.
You were
but
winging it.
I
Yeah.
was winging it, but here's like Greg Maxwell explaining things to me. Like it was
Good mentorship.
right. There
Yeah.
was pretty great mentorship opportunities.
And he was happy to do it.
Yeah, and it was just a super open community, and people had time, and it was. I mean, it was a hobby project for everyone at the time. It wasn't until the Bitcoin Foundation, quite a few years later, where Gavin and Corey and Vladimir had full-time employment working on Bitcoin, and then a few years after that, when I graduated college, we co-founded Blockstream.
So
And
right
that
after
was-
that was going to be my next question was like, so you
Yeah.
did go to college and you continued to be like active in the scene whilst
Yeah.
being a full-time college student.
Yeah.
So you weren't like, you didn't have like a job,
No, yeah.
but then immediately upon graduating from college, you were like you were participated in founding Blockstream.
Yeah. So I got out in 3 years, graduated, and then Blockstream started that summer, I guess.
Blockstream seems to have a lot of founders. Like, is that like
We
that's
had
something-
11 of them.
That's something that I've observed.
Yes.
I'm like, every time I hear they're like, the founder of Blockstream, I'm like, which one? And
Right.
it's like a different one.
Really, Adam and Austin were the founders. The rest of us were there on day one, and I mean, we were founders. We were there on day one, trying to figure out what the company should do.
Okay, so that's the
But-
definition of a founder. It's like
Right.
there were like 11 like initial like contributors essentially to this company
Right.
effort.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And were you all kind of doing different things? Like what were the who was doing what in that a core 11 or whatever to the extent that you can
That-
remember?
Company had too many cooks in the kitchen, as you might imagine, for a company with 11 co-founders who all feel a lot of ownership of the company. There were a lot of cooks in that kitchen.
So there wasn't like a clear hierarchy. I mean, you said
There
Adam.
was Adam was in charge. I think from day one. Greg was CTO.
Okay.
Austin was in charge for a while, and then but yeah, I mean, there were a lot of engineering
everyone else
co-founders who were fairly involved in direction planning of the company. I mean, from day one, I mean, like, okay, there was this company founded. We were like, well, we want to do kind of stuff in the Bitcoin technology direction, building stuff on Bitcoin, building cool stuff to expand Bitcoin, make it more accessible, whatever. But there wasn't anything concrete on day one, and so we had a lot of meetings of the 11 of us to chat about just what does that mean? What concretely do we want to build? What is the actual thing here? And then kind of as that concluded, as we had more concrete ideas and things we were building, then it turned into a little more of a company. And like, I guess, was Adam CTO at the beginning and Greg was head of engineering and then Austin was CEO? I think that's how it shook out, but I don't remember anymore.
Wait, so did you fundraise without having concrete ideas, or was it just like 11 people?
Oh yeah, we got $21 million in a
Like
seed
right
round
out
with
the gate.
no idea what we were doing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And is that was just like sort of like on the basis of the team? Did that like contribute to like how the 11 came together? Was like, oh, we need like this person and this person, and then, we'll raise a bunch of money, or
Not entirely. I mean, it was just like, at the time, again, the only people who were working full time on Bitcoin were the Bitcoin Foundation folks, which imploded fairly quickly. And then I guess Gloria and Vladimir ended up at DCI. I think that might have been later. But there weren't jobs for Bitcoin developers. Like we knew
there were no companies, really?
Not really. I mean, like Coinbase, I think existed. There were some exchanges. There were some people doing other stuff, but there weren't like, we have this Bitcoin thing. We think it's great, but it by itself isn't enough. People should be interacting with it in more ways than just having an on-chain wallet.
They thought that. They did think that. People were like, we need to build stuff. We need to build like an economy of things around this.
Yeah, we need to build
network.
Scaling solutions. We need to build layers on top of Bitcoin. And, we knew we wanted to do that. We weren't sure exactly what that looked like when we started, but we knew we wanted to do that. We knew that needed to exist for Bitcoin to continue to grow. And so we kind of pulled together all the people who had been working part-time as a hobby project on Bitcoin for quite a while at that point,
and we're like, let's
4 or 5 years.
Create a conglomerate to build things.
Yeah,
whatever that means.
Get together and see what we think it takes to make Bitcoin better and build cool tech on it. And probably there will be some way to make revenue on that after we build it, but we don't know. We'll figure it out.
It's amazing that because in my mind, I think like, oh, wouldn't it be more capital efficient to be like, okay, so like all of these individual people are really bright and understand and want to build, like, okay, you build that and you build that and you raise your own money for that and you raise your own money for that.
If you think Blockstream was an exercise in capital efficiency, I've no words for you.
I mean, it's just like the whole thing, it does seem kind of ridiculous, like looking back on it.
It seemed ridiculous at the time.
It did seem ridiculous at the time. Okay, so
we were sitting there like, you gave us how much money to, okay, all right,
like
well,
for like
11
people to just be like, build stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I was a student. I didn't know what I was doing, and I still thought it was ridiculous, so...
Interesting. Okay, so then how practically did it pan out? Did like all 11 people kind of like break out and like do their own things?
No, I mean, we wanted to figure out what it meant to build technologies around Bitcoin to help Bitcoin scale and help Bitcoin grow. Like we all had...
Scaling was the focus from day one.
I wouldn't necessarily say scaling, but like growth, right? So like maybe...
Progress.
There were more challenges than just scaling. There's like, well, transactions are slow and transactions are, okay, they're expensive because of scalability limits, but they're also slow and they're also whatever. There's also lack of features. There's lack of, there were a number of constraints that we, thought should be addressed in some way.
Was Lightning already in ideation phase at this point?
No, Lightning came much later.
Much later.
Yeah.
When did Blockstream? When was this? Like, where are we in time and space when the 11 came together and raised $21 million to do mysterious things?
So let's see, high school +4, so something like 2015 or so.
And then the 11, just for clarity, because I think this is interesting, the 11 of you basically met on IRC.
Basically. Yeah. I had only met Adam randomly. Some other guys were trying to start a startup that made no sense. And they had pulled in Adam and myself. So I'd met Adam there. But like Greg and Peter and some of the other folks, I'd only ever met on IRC. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And you were like, okay, I guess we're doing, somebody DM'd you and was like, do you want to start a company? I think we just got 20 million.
A little more than that, but yeah. I mean, that's a little bit of a simplification, but yeah,
sure.
Close to that.
Okay, so you're here. You have the 20 million. You have 11 people. How long did it take? I mean, what were the original ideas? Like, what were like the early
Yeah, I mean,
Blockstream research days like?
I think we landed on the like sidechains idea somewhat
First?
quickly.
Okay.
I don't
Was it Liquid
recall.
right away, or was it just like Sidechains, the paper? Because I remember the Sidechains
Yeah,
paper.
we weren't really necessarily looking to do the like federated sidechain thing. Like, I mean, the goal really was like we want decentralized sidechains. We want sidechains secured by hash power, where like, okay, you're taking a risk because you're assuming that hash rate is decentralized and that there's sufficient number of different miners with sufficient hash rate to protect the coins across this bridge.
That are all going
Um,
to also like mine something other than Bitcoin, right? I mean, essentially, that's also the assumption.
no, yeah, they would mine this other
This
chain,
other
but it would
chain,
still
yeah,
be Bitcoin denominated. Yeah.
sure.
Um, and yeah, I mean, we landed on that fairly quickly. I think that was the goal, is this decentralized thing. Now, of course, Bitcoin mining has not been decentralized enough for that to really make sense.
Hmm.
It wasn't at the time. It still isn't today. Um, Hopefully it will be in the future still.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it didn't really make sense. And so it was like, okay, well, we had this sidechain thing. We spent a lot of time batting around what the future would look like with sidechains. Like, okay, well, eventually we're going to get ZK snarks, and then we can like have a much better bridge and
That was a discussion
whatever.
back then.
Yeah. I mean, ZK snarks they existed in theory at the time. They didn't exist in implementation.
But were
Um,
people like actually entertaining things like potentially having like a ZK verifier and script? Like, was that a conversation
I
that
mean,
was happening?
it was definitely a like, yeah, eventually we'll get to there. People will actually build these things, then we'll add it, and then we'll be able to use it, and then it'll be great.
Did
But
people
it
have
was like,
were people like expressing concerns a lot of at that time, or were they mostly excited about those kinds of developments at the time?
I mean, we certainly knew it was a long ways off.
Okay,
Like,
so you weren't
we
that
weren't like,
worried because you were like, it's way back
yeah,
and way
we'll get
far
there, but
away.
like, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it was a long ways off.
Okay, yeah, it was like a nice idea.
Right, right. So yeah, I mean, we batted that around a lot. We had a lot of conversations around it, and then I mean, we started working on it. We started working on implementation of some of this stuff, and then it was like, well, we don't necessarily want to use hash power for this right now. So, well, okay, there's this like idea of using a federation for it, and so then it ended up being kind of liquid.
The Sidechains paper that came out, that was not the federated. That was like the sort of merge mining situation.
No, yeah, we called it. What do we call it? It was the DMMS, the decentralized multi-member multi-party signature. No, something.
But you didn't need a federated. And
And
again,
that was a reference to just like hash power as the concept of an authority, basically. That hash power, Bitcoin in the SPV model, this like reduced trust model, operates with hash power as the authority, signing things,
oh,
and that we could use that as the authority in like this kind of bridging system.
okay. So then you literally wouldn't even need this like multi-sig situation, like where people
Right.
have to like, you wouldn't need a peg effectively.
Right. Yeah. You would have I mean, it would be this decentralized peg where miners are enforcing the rules.
It's like
Yeah.
numeric instead of like sending Bitcoin into a wallet.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. It's like math. Okay. So when did the federated sidechains model kind of come to be and Liquid kind of come to be? This was like your brainchild, right? I mean, you wrote you wrote the Liquid paper, or you co-authored it?
No, no. I was I was a co-author on the Sidechains paper.
Okay.
Liquid was this guy Johnny Dilly's brainchild, really.
Okay.
He wrote this paper he called the Strong Federations paper.
Okay. How was it received at the time?
I think it was more targeted at like businesses and folks to say like, hey, look, you know,
This is a practical solution.
yeah, there's a practical solution. Also, like exchanges, hey, you want to settle arbitrage flows faster. You want to, have more access. Like a trader might want to have more access to exchanges faster. You could, have your funds sitting on Liquid, and then you could deposit into different exchanges rather than having a, pot of potential ARB money on many exchanges, like a capital efficiency question. And so it was really targeted more at kind of that market and not the broader Bitcoin community for use as like a day-to-day transacting platform.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like it was just like a commercially practical solution to a challenge, and it's
Yeah.
interesting that, but it was never thought of amongst like actual technical people as like a long-term solution or like solving like real problems around bridging.
No, yeah. I mean, yeah, the intent for Liquid wasn't really the original intent for Liquid was not to be a normal transacting platform for like normal people and to just like be the long-term thing that we want everyone to use for, scalability or more features on chain or anything like that. No.
Were you involved? Well, and actually, before I go on to that, so would you say like mostly the technical community just wasn't really paying that much attention to these like federated sidechain models? Again, it was just like a commercial thing and like whatever.
I mean, a decent chunk of the technical community worked at Blockstream, so we were certainly aware of it and working on it
Right.
professionally. But
Right.
in terms of it being
It
like,
didn't thrill you.
yeah, and in terms of it being like the future of Bitcoin, it wasn't
No one
for
thought
that.
that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Lightning, on the other hand, when did Lightning happen in the Blockstream conversation? Like, what? I mean, could you take us back a little and
Yeah.
talk about like the development of Lightning from the
Man,
iteration
if I
phases?
had known you were gonna ask me for all these dates, I would have prepped notes. But
Apology. Rough as I'm just,
I'm
trying to
really
give
bad at
people
dates.
the TLDR.
I'm really bad with dates. But so yeah, I mean
During this
not
time.
long after Blockstream started, there's kind of the block size wars heated up, and then not too far into the block size wars, this Lightning paper came out, which was, payment channels had been around forever. I think, even Satoshi had this concept of transaction sequence number and had kind of described this idea of like, you might have you and some other party, you might have some transaction that you replace repeatedly in the mempool before it gets confirmed. And it's like kind of starts to look payment channel-y, lightning-y.
Mhm.
And then Jeremy Spillman came up with the original payment channel design, practical payment channel design in 2013, which I then implemented in 2013 as an intern at Google, weirdly enough,
Okay.
before Blockstream. And then, but,
At Google, you implemented a payments channel.
yeah, it
What
was.
was
I
that
think I'm the
about?
only person to have ever been paid full time by Google to work on Bitcoin open
Okay, so
source
you were
software.
working on Bitcoin.
But
But I
yeah,
heard back in the day that those like big tech companies were actually like weirdly more interested in Bitcoin as a payment
Google was not
service.
interested.
Oh,
Google was
okay.
not interested at all. It was some people. It was like Mike Hearn was my mentor, and another colleague of his was my manager.
You
Like,
got lucky.
yeah, like they were just like burnt out, and they were like, "We want to work on some Bitcoin stuff. Let's explore that." And the company was like, "Sure, whatever. Y'all have tenure, and basically,
Oh my
we'll do
gosh.
whatever."
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so it was that payment channels, but payment channels they didn't scale properly because you had this channel and you could just send it back and forth. You send the
That's
payment
it.
to these two
Yeah. There was no
entities, like,
settlement.
and
Yeah.
so like, okay, we had some like vague conceptions of like, okay, maybe you can just split a payment into many small pieces and you could route it across multiple hops, and as long as the payments keep flowing all the way through, like they could, some intermediate node could steal a few cents of this larger payment, but they're not like an atomic payment. You're sending a bunch of payments over and
Yeah.
over again, and it might actually take quite a while by the time you really start making progress. So it didn't really work. And so this Lightning idea was like, okay, actually, no, we can take payment channels, we can extend them, we can make payments across multiple hops in a channel. Um, and
And we can
that was
settle
kind of,
back.
yeah, and then
And
we
we
can
have like,
settle.
yeah.
And so they're one atomic payment all the way across the network. And that, yeah, I mean, the paper came out kind of during the block size wars, and it maybe in the middle of the block size wars, let's say.
Did people
Um,
think of it as like, oh, this is going to save the problem? Like, what was the immediate response?
Yeah, I mean, I think people were like, "Wow, that's really cool. That's potentially really awesome." By this point, we had identified the malleability problem. So it was like we don't really know how to build Lightning on Bitcoin today due to deficiencies in Bitcoin's design. Um, and so there was some work
Was there a
towards,
specific like like wrinkle?
yeah, so the malleability issue, which was ultimately solved by SegWit, was that I could take a transaction and broadcast, and like we could have some transaction that we're agreeing on, but then when I broadcast, I could like re-sign it. I could just like swap some bits in my signature, and now it has a different TXID. And so in fact, even like a miner could do that, or some intermediate node on the network could take your transaction, do some twiddling, wouldn't invalidate it. It would like still go to the same place, but the TXID would change. And this totally wrecks Lightning because you have like a root, you have this transaction that we're going to build, and then we're going to pre-sign it, and then we're going to agree on it before we broadcast the first transaction that it's spending.
It doesn't work with pre-signatures, basically.
And so, yeah, it breaks a lot of these pre-signature schemes.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so there was some attempts to fix malleability, whatever. They were
and then
pretty
SegWit
hacky.
fixed it?
And then SegWit was like, oh, actually, here's a much cleaner way for us to fix malleability. And then, the drama became SegWit and whatnot. And then Blockstream and around the same time, Lightning Labs started investing in actually building a Lightning implementation, kind of assuming SegWit. There were some hacks they could do to like kind of make it work in a pre-SegWit Bitcoin with malleability issues, but they were
hacky. Hoping for the real deal.
They were hoping for the real deal, and were kind of building it out as proof point of like, no, we can actually build this. This is a real thing. We should activate SegWit, whatever. And then of course, ultimately SegWit did activate. The block size wars concluded basically with a bang and then a fizzle. First we got SegWit, and then SegWit 2x fizzled out. And then Lightning was kind of there now and not long thereafter ready to go and kind of launched.
Interesting. So did you work on Lightning very deeply yourself?
Not at the time. No, I didn't start working on Lightning until a few years ago.
Okay. A few years ago.
2019 or 2018, yeah.
At what point did you leave Blockstream and why?
I left Blockstream during the block size wars. I went to a research lab called Chaincode Labs on the East Coast, which is great, a great place. Blockstream had too many cooks in the kitchen, and it just was. At some point, I wasn't super happy there, and Chaincode gave me.
Was it like difficult to get stuff done? Did you feel like it was like bureaucratic, or
in
like
some cases? But like also just Blockstream was in the middle of the block size wars, and it was good to be outside of that. And Chaincode Labs was, Blockstream was like kind of trying to be a for-profit company while also most of its engineers were spending all of their time actually just doing open source Bitcoin because the block size wars were going on, and there was all this drama.
This was going to be my next question, which was like, at Blockstream, like how much just like core contribution stuff was happening? How much influence was there by like Blockstream on things like SegWit, et cetera? Like, it sounds like it was a little bit of a gray situation.
A lot of people ended up spending most of their time on block size wars and open source Bitcoin code.
So it's like investments that were like invested that ended up kind of being like, charitable contributions to Bitcoin Core.
For the early rounds, yes, I would say so.
Okay.
Blockstream's a real company now doing real things, but certainly the early rounds of Blockstream, very much so.
Okay. Chaincode
is explicitly not for profit. There's no profit motive. There's no desire to ever make a profit. They just lose money.
Or they just pay for what they want. Is another way to think about it.
Would be another way to look at that. They're not legally a for-profit. So
they're just
legally it's a company that just
want.
loses money all the time and has never succeeded at making any money. It's apparently just a really bad company.
How many devs are employed at Chaincode Labs? Like how many?
Now a handful. At the time, it was basically me and the two founders, Alex and Suhas, who pay for it. And then one other guy,
and
Brad
they're just
Andrews,
like Bitcoin whales who just want Bitcoin to just be functional and succeed.
They're engineers, really. I mean, they both were two of the first people doing high frequency trading on Wall Street.
Oh, interesting.
So they're engineers. I mean, MIT engineers, MIT and Harvard engineers, who are super brilliant, and they made a bunch of money on Wall Street and like thought Bitcoin was really awesome and wanted to work on Bitcoin themselves. So they were in the office every day working on Bitcoin Core, and also paying me and this guy Brad to work on Bitcoin Core.
Were they active like from the early when did they get involved in Bitcoin?
I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, kind of early-ish in the block size wars is when they started.
They weren't hanging out on the IRC chats.
Not in 2011, no.
Okay.
A little later, they were.
So Chaincode Labs happens at some point later on, like post Blockstream being founded.
Yeah, they exists. They had some trouble hiring, whatever, and then I went there for a while. We ran what we called the hacker residency.
It
We
was just
helped.
the three of you initially. You were the first hire, or like the
No, they had hired someone before who didn't stick around, and then they hired this guy Brad who was there when I joined, but he also didn't stick around. And then we ran the hacker residency to like kind of help train new Bitcoin developers. Um, and ended up hiring one or two out of that. And then this guy, John, who we'd hired out of that, drove it forward, ran more residencies, and Chaincode became a little bit more of a development hub and ended up hiring a number more people.
how was that experience working with Chaincode?
Chaincode's great. I mean, it was nice to be at a company that where we weren't ever asking the question of, are we going to make money on anything?
Yeah, you could just like just
We're
straight up just do what's good for
hanging out.
Bitcoin.
And the two founders are two of the most humble, just great guys. They might have made a lot of money on Wall Street, but like they're just really engineers who just want to work on Bitcoin and want to make Bitcoin great. Sadly, neither work on Bitcoin all that much anymore, but they still fund Chaincode and yeah, I mean, just two brilliant, great guys. Again, even then, I was still pretty young and like to hang out with them and work with them all day was great.
Did you go to, and then eventually you went to Spiral, or did ChatGPT lie to me?
No, yeah. Oh, sheesh, ChatGPT knows my life story. That's frightening.
ChatGPT knows everything
Ooh,
about
boy.
you.
Anyway, yeah. So after a while, I was chasing a girl, who is now my wife, so it worked out. But she was an SF. Chaincode is an in-person office environment,
I see.
and I wanted a remote gig. And
I
so
see.
Block was at the time starting this development lab within Block, or at the time the company was still called Square. The parent company
Jack
was called
Dorsey.
Square. Jack Dorsey's company, or his first company, not the Twitter
This
one.
was when Jack Dorsey was like really like, I'm a Bitcoiner now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he had kind of asked some of the folks within Square at the time, like, we want to support Bitcoin. We want to help build Bitcoin because it's going to help the company. We think if Bitcoin becomes a really great money that people want to use, then the company will be out from under the thumb of Visa and will like benefit from it because we're going to invest in this and we're going to, be on the forefront of it. And Jack had asked some folks within the company, like, hey, how do we make that happen? And they were like, well, let's hire some developers to just build Bitcoin. And so they got this guy, Steve Lee, who's now my boss, who was at the time just trying to become like kind of a Bitcoin PM, trying to like help manage open source, not really manage, but like kind of just unblock open source developers, help people keep things moving like a good PM. And he joined, and then I was chatting with him or whatever, and then I decided to join because I wanted a remote gig. And so I was the first engineering hire, and then we hired a few more. And then we sat down with Jack actually on an offsite, and we're just like, okay, well, we've got all these great engineers. What do we want to do? Similar Blockstream kind of like, okay, we got the team. What do we want to do?
It sounds very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we had a number of conversations about like, okay, well, our goal is to, I forget exactly how we phrased our mission, but our goal is to like make Bitcoin the best money. And we had a number of conversations
Sounds
about like what is that?
Slightly, I just want to pause there because I think it's an interesting cultural and like important kind of historical shift that what became the mission versus let's build interesting progressive technologies on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little better defined at that point.
More narrowly defined might be the
little more narrowly defined, like definitely more focused on payments and like a money rather than Blockstream, where it was a lot more like, building out the platform, maybe, or maybe it's the payments, or like we're figuring it out still. So anyway, yeah, we had
the use case was specific, right? It's like money as a use case is the thing,
right,
versus like that seemed maybe a little bit more open ended in the Blockstream, even though it wasn't.
Blockstream, we were still focused on like Bitcoin, like we wanted to make Bitcoin great, the coin,
right? But like for instance, like where would like lending fall in that category?
Right, like
would Blockstream
Bitcoin
be cool with that, but like Spiral maybe not care about that?
Yeah. Blockstream was definitely very like, a part of it too at Blockstream was like we were trying to also enable more features on Bitcoin and enable people to do more interesting and clever ideas on top of Bitcoin, whereas Spiral was really just like, we want to make Bitcoin the best money, and that means improving payments. Maybe that means improving fungibility, whatever it is, but it's really about making Bitcoin the best money.
That makes sense.
Um,
What were you working on? So you didn't just sort of bring what you were working on at Chaincode to Spiral.
kind of ended up doing that. Not, it wasn't even my idea actually, but kind of did.
What were you working on at the time at Chaincode?
At Chaincode, I had worked on Bitcoin Core for most of the time. Bitcoin.
Anything in particular that you thought was interesting within? I mean,
I worked on Bitcoin Core for almost a decade, so I did a lot of stuff, wore a lot of hats. I ended up doing a bunch of mining stuff, mining optimization, mining block relay stuff towards the end while at Chaincode. But then I also started working on Lightning stuff, started playing around. Like, none of the people working on Bitcoin Core at the time had done any Lightning stuff, so I was like, I should figure this out. I kind of started hacking on an implementation just to learn and see what was going on. And then we started Spiral, and we were chatting about like where can we have the highest ROI. And one of my colleagues, Val, suggested like, should we work on Lightning? Should we make Lightning more accessible to people? Because at the time, like, and even today, Core Lightning and LND are great as routing nodes running on a server, but they don't really bring mobile Lightning. Like, they're a little hard to fit on a phone.
Is this when you wrote your famous paper, Lightning is Broken AF? Or
that was
later?
much later.
Oh, okay,
I gave a talk, but so we kind of decided like, well, actually, if we really improve Lightning and we make Lightning more accessible to people, non-custodial Lightning more accessible to people, then that has the biggest ROI on making Bitcoin the best money. And so then we committed to working on Lightning, working on this project at the time called Rest Lightning that is now a Lightning Dev Kit, which is a flexible Lightning node that can run on a phone and run on an HSM and do whatever you need it to.
And can like plug into applications more easily than that's like the key feature of LDK essentially. Right. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so you were working on LDK. Obviously you mentioned that you've done a ton of work in the mining space. I think would love to sort of touch on that. When did you kind of get interested in like sort of advocacy around like mining centralization specifically?
Mining centralization has always been a key challenge in Bitcoin. I mentioned, we were talking about sidechains at Blockstream. We were thinking about, well, we really want to use hash rate for this, but we can't because it's too centralized. Because we would really be trusting 3 entities to hold this money, and that doesn't fly.
Right.
So it's always been a top a top risk to Bitcoin.
Were you writing about it and presenting about it though at that time? Like, when did you start getting like loud about it?
Yeah, a little less so. I think part of it too is we didn't have kind of solutions for it. It was like, okay, this is a problem, but we want there to be more pools, but how are we going to do that?
We hate talking about problems we don't have solutions for.
Yeah, and we had, the idea for things like Stratum V2, where you can take, pools are fundamentally in the business of reducing payout variance. So if you're a small miner, you want to get paid the same amount every day. That is the service the pool is providing. They take a fee for that. Great. It's a technical artifact of the way the first pools were created that is a side effect from that. The pool is the one picking the transactions that go in the block.
Right.
There's no inherent reason why it has to be that way. It was a little simpler to implement it that way. It is a little simpler to implement it that way. But it's not inherent.
A little simpler?
Honestly, yeah, only kind of a little.
So then why do you think it took so long for the Stratum of the world?
Because the existing thing worked fine for miners.
So you think it was more like a commercial? It wasn't a technical challenge to get decentralized pools working. It was like a commercial issue?
Yeah, or centralized pools with decentralized transaction selection specifically.
That was a commercial issue.
That's a commercial issue. It remains a commercial issue.
It remains, definitely remains a commercial issue.
All the miners already support that protocol. They don't support some new protocol. And so that's what the pools offer, because that's what all the miners support, that all the devices support, that everyone wants to use.
But how do you, but the commercial issue should be solvable, right? I mean, because you can theoretically, I mean, is that where the technical challenge lies? Is like, okay, but is there a way to sort of, for all of us to like sort of hedge and share in the context of this decentralized templating?
If you want a truly decentralized pool, there are a number of technical challenges. P2 Pool existed in 2013, 2012, 2014. Worked very well. So it's not like it's impractical to build a decentralized pool.
So if you want to profit share, if miners really want to like share the risk essentially in a decentralized way, that is difficult.
That's fairly challenging, yeah.
Okay.
If you are willing to have a centralized company doing that part of the equation.
And that's the golden standard. I mean, that's really what people
that's
want.
The goal. That's what we want.
That's what
but if
people
we're
want.
okay with a centralized entity, which is at least a lot better than today's day, right? If we get centralized pools that are doing that logic, but allow the end miners to select the transactions in the block, that's still almost as good for Bitcoin. It's not great necessarily because, the pool could like kick a miner off and now they're not getting paid. And so they have to if there's only one pool, it's still very problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as there's still some competition and miners can switch freely, it's not as big a deal. And at the end of the day, the thing that matters to the protocol is that the transaction selection in the block is decentralized. That's what matters, right?
Makes
That's
sense.
the centralized
but in
censorship resistance that we need.
In order to make that practically viable, though, you also need to ensure that miners are distributing their risk, right? I mean, this is the challenge. This is the fundamental challenge.
Yeah, you need many options for pools, but you don't necessarily need them to be that decentralized.
How do you feel like solving this problem is going? I mean, so we have Ocean. I'd be curious to get your take, but
So
all right, guys, I want to take a quick break to thank you for watching and remind you to click the follow button on my profile if you'd like more Bitcoin technical deep dives like this. I also want to give a shout out to my partners for making the show possible. Best in Slot and Unisat are, of course, co-maintainers of the BRC20 protocol. They are working on some incredible updates to BRC20, including the BRC20 programmability module designed by Best in Slot, which is currently in testnet. This will make execution of smart contracts for BRC20 possible at the indexer level, which is about as trustless and Bitcoin native as it gets. Unisat is also working on a single-step transfer function for BRC20, which I know many of you will be excited about. That's been widely requested by the BRC20 community. And last but not least, my incredible Layer 2 partner, Citria, who I couldn't be more excited about teaming up with. Citria is working on one of the leading implementations of a BitVM zero-knowledge proof-style bridge, an execution environment for Bitcoin. So they're essentially building what I think could become the canonical Bitcoin roll-up, and they have an absolutely incredible team of people backing them up and getting really creative about how to push this technology forward. So in my opinion, once we have a truly trust-minimized bridge, anything is possible for Bitcoin. So I'm very grateful to Citria for their work and for supporting the show. Let's get back to it.
The idea for having this kind of protocol is very old. We were talking about it at Blockstream, but no one ever sat down and did it and kind of made it available to people. So we sat down, me and the Brains being the former Slush Pool company, sat down and wrote the spec for this thing we called Stratum V2, Stratum V1 being the protocol that miners used with Slush Pool. It was the first pool that it has these centralization concerns. And we wrote Stratum V2.
Which optimized in which specific ways from Stratum V1?
Which was much more efficient than Stratum V1. It added authentication to the protocol so that you actually knew you were talking to the pool and you weren't getting man in the middle. It was a binary protocol, so it was a little less bandwidth. But most importantly, it enabled, for pools that allowed it, miners to select the transactions of the block.
Okay, so Stratum V1 didn't have that optionality at all.
It didn't have that at all. It also has a lot of issues. It's poorly documented, whatever. But we fixed those issues, but also we enabled miners to pick the transactions.
That's the key point. Yeah, okay.
And it has been a slow burn. So I have been busy working on Lightning stuff. I didn't have a chance to work on building out Stratum V2. And so we at Spiral spent a long time trying to find people who wanted to work on it. We offered grants. We were like, we'll pay you just, if you want to work on this. took a long time. We did eventually get people who wanted to work on it. There is now a team building it, which has been great. They've shipped code that can work, that people can use, but the pools, getting pool adoption has been a chicken and egg problem. Most miners aren't super Bitcoiners. They're just like, yeah, we care about our revenue and whatever. And the pools are like, okay, well, the miners don't care. We're not going to rip up our entire tech stack, rebuild it around this new protocol just to make Bitcoin a little better.
Well,
It's a hard sell.
this was going to be my question for clarification. Is a Stratum V2 is a protocol. There's no like official like business around it, right? Like you're dependent on these commercial entities to adopt it. Right. Ocean, I feel like one of the things that they did well is that they created like a commercial apparatus around the protocol that they built. Why didn't you guys do that?
Because I'm busy doing other things. And I mean, there is one of the first developers around Stratum V2 has now teamed up with someone to build a pool called Demand Pool. So that's launched unclear to me. But they're working on it.
Okay. But you think that's like
they have stuff that works. I
don't know
that
raised money?
I think they've raised money. I'm not 100% sure.
Because Ocean benefited from that. I mean, and this is the type of business where you really actually do need to raise money.
Yeah, of course.
Because it takes time to like even get the hash. Yeah.
Yeah. I believe they've raised money. They're launched in private access, I think. They're not like publicly available yet.
Okay.
But it exists. There's many other pools.
That's interesting. I would love for Ocean to have a real competitor, honestly.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for that day.
And I think one thing that has been a nice benefit of Ocean existing is that now pools feel a little more pressures. Like there is actually a pool that's saying this is a feature that matters.
Fair.
And there are, Ocean's hash rate is basically a rounding error, but still there are at least some non-zero number of miners who are opting to use that over these other pools.
And they've
grown a little bit.
Right, right. Like in theory, if the trend continues.
I'm not sure I would call it a trend. They haven't been growing that much, but they've been growing some.
Okay.
And so
do you see them grow? I mean, do you see that them gaining if they don't have competitors?
They had a bunch of hash rate and then they lost a bunch of hash rate and now they've gotten most of that back. So yeah.
Okay.
But they've grown a little bit.
Okay.
I wouldn't say they've grown quickly. But they've grown.
It's more conceptual than like a real.
It's not like a huge risk to Foundry's business or something, right?
Right.
They're not like quaking in their boots that Ocean's going to take all their market share.
Right.
But that existing has put pressure on some of the pools to say, hey, look, this is a feature that matters, and so I think they care more. It's a lot of work for them to do this kind of thing.
Is that the issue? Is that
rip up a lot of their existing architecture and rebuild it.
So
and I think
that's the
issue.
issue.
A big part of the issue.
It's just like you have to put like real developer resources towards like integrating this with your business.
Yeah, especially on the pool side. And so, it's been a slog getting people interested. There is now interest. I'm hoping it translates into launches. Bitmain announced, I think today, that they're doing something. It's probably not Stratum V2. We don't know what it is, but they announced like an hour ago or something at a different I guess there's another mining conference going on right now.
Side event?
I don't know. That they're going to allow miners to pick the block templates.
Oh, interesting.
I have no idea what protocol they're using. Probably some proprietary thing they built, but cool. Great.
Yeah.
Good for Bitcoin.
Great.
So I think like Ocean existing has kind of driven some of that.
It's like narrative from a narrative perspective.
It's narrative,
helpful.
And I've given talks about it. Like I had the prime slot on the main stage last year. I had the lead into Trump last year on the main stage, and I used it to moan about mining centralization and talk about how big a risk this is to Bitcoin and how Bitmain is in many ways historically been the evil monster that the evil multi-headed octopus in Bitcoin that keeps popping up and keeps driving this, and it's not been good.
Are you optimistic?
So I'm going to take credit for Bitmain's decision.
Okay.
It probably had nothing to do with it, but I called them out on the main stage, so I don't know.
I mean,
maybe
a little pressure.
Yeah.
Are you optimistic about solving this problem?
It seems like things are shifting. It seems like things are starting to shift in the sense that now pools intend to offer miners the option. Then we have to get miners to do it, which is a whole other battle. But I'm a year ago, I was very pessimistic because we just didn't have much to show for it.
And
But
that's a much
now,
less like getting miners to do it and tell me if I'm wrong, intuitively feels like a less difficult problem than getting pools to integrate all this new development.
yeah, I mean, I think there are many miners who have invested a lot of money on their own tech stacks that they would have to similarly
Oh, it's going to be a
redo.
similar situation.
But I think so. First of all, I mean, it's no longer a chicken and egg problem at that point,
Right.
right? Now there's actually it's just the chicken or just the egg.
Right.
So that's much better.
And mining technology is generally like evolves more frequently.
Yeah,
So like
like
you can add new stuff.
the next company will build around it instead of the old solution, right?
Right.
And we can offer better. Stratum V2 has invested in offering better auditing tooling for miners to better audit their payouts to make sure they're getting paid the right amount. Just
Right.
business stuff that adds a lot of value and means a lot to some of these miners. And so, yeah, once the pools exist, then it is a much easier challenge, even if it is still a non-trivial challenge.
So this was sort of like a key issue that you sort of taken up, I think, in your sort of advocacy work. MEV specifically, that's a more recent thing that you're kind of sounding the alarm bells on?
Yeah, that's much more recent. The MEV issue has a lot more to do with kind of the invention of BitVM and
Ordinals and
excitement.
all of that.
Yeah, like BRC20 and the stuff people are doing on top of that more than ordinals.
DeFi,
But
like
yeah, the
Bitcoin
people
DeFi.
trying to do Bitcoin DeFi, exactly.
Right.
And so that came up when people started bringing these examples out. And then it was like, okay, now we see the writing on the wall that people are trying to do a lot of the same stuff that exists on Ethereum, on Bitcoin. And now, okay, well, what are the risks from that? Well, we know that Ethereum has huge problems with this.
I watched your talk about this at Bitcoin Plus Plus, and it was incredibly helpful. I was not ever really in Ethereum. I mean, I've worked in Bitcoin only for like 4 years, and I never really thought about MEV, and I didn't even really understand like what it was or what it meant practically, like granularly. It's like, okay, miner extracted value, but like, let's talk about like how that would actually work. Like, can you just give a little bit of a TLDR for folks on like how MEV on Ethereum works and why specifically like meta protocols on Bitcoin and these L2s might recreate that on Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Ethereum has this huge problem where you create a transaction, but what does the miner do? Do they actually just include that transaction? Do they do something else with it? In Bitcoin, this is like, what are you talking about? This makes no sense. If you create a transaction, you're paying someone, the miner just includes it, they take the fee, there's nothing here.
It's done.
In Ethereum, you have orders of magnitude more complexity, right? So maybe my transaction is trading Ethereum to USDC on a DEX. Well, okay, now the miner actually might want to give me a worse execution price so that they can arbitrage the difference and make that difference in revenue for themselves. And that's the simplest example by far. Represents a non-trivial portion of total miner extractable value in Ethereum. Is just arbitraging prices between centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges. But then there's just the complexity. There's so many different smart contracts that do so many different things. And if you're a miner or an Ethereum staker, and you can sit down and say, okay, well, there's this contract that someone just put more money into. And I know that if I know that this contract exists where I can take a flash loan to get instant, like, $1 billion of liquidity temporarily. And then I go over here. And because this person put more money into this contract, I can like dump it and throw the price off there, and then I can repay the flash loan, and then I can arbitrage this and make a ton of money. Now you can make more money as a miner. But in order to do that, you needed to know all of the details of this contract and that contract and this contract, and then you needed to know that you could arbit. And so now you have to have a bunch of capital sitting at Binance so that you can execute the other leg of the trade, and it's just complex. So you can't just be a miner and just say, oh, I'm just gonna like hook up some hash rate. I'm gonna mine whatever transactions are in the MEVPool, and I'm gonna get paid. No, if you do that, you're making 10, 20, 30% less revenue than your competitions. And you only had a 5% profit margin, and it's a super competitive business, and you all have roughly the same cost because electricity cost for cheap electricity is kind of similar. and now you're just out of business. You're
So
out of business before you even got started.
it turns mining, instead of just sort of like competing around who can get like the cheapest energy, it turns mining into like cheapest energy plus who can like arb the most value on top of
Who can
the
invest
blocks
millions of dollars and hire the best PhDs out of MIT to yada yada.
to like figure out how to like extract the most value, right? I mean,
Right.
essentially. And so I think that like the key thing here is that this is a centralization risk, right? Because
Huge.
ultimately that means that the competitive miners will be people who can afford to hire all of these people
Right.
to do all of these
Yeah,
skilled things.
fundamentally, we really need mining to be, one
the
hash,
plebs.
$1.
Right.
Like your revenue is completely linear in the amount of hash rate you have. And there are some economies of scale in large scale mining. If you want super cheap power, well, sometimes you can get a small amount of power for free. You can't get a ton of power for free. And so there are some economies of scale there that have really kept mining decentralized, not to mention just the competition of that game. But once you start looking at, okay, well, you're going to make a lot more revenue because you invested $10 million in hiring the smartest people versus your competition. Well, now it's not linear anymore. Now it's very super linear, and the largest miners make more money than the smaller miners per hash. And now the largest miners are growing faster, and now you only have large miners.
So what is the solution to this? I mean, Ethereum has sort of its own solutions. What do we do on Bitcoin? Is it comparable? I mean, it might be worth starting with how Ethereum deals with this, but yeah, what's the Bitcoin solution as well?
So what Ethereum did, Ethereum has had this problem since before they switched to proof of stake, but it's just gotten progressively worse and worse and worse. And they identified this at some point, and there was this company founded called Flashbots, which was a bunch of kind of Ethereum researchers who said, like, we think this is a big problem. We need to found a company and address this. They raised some money, and they built what they called proposer-builder separation. And I'll be honest, I never remember which one's the proposer and which one's the builder. It doesn't really matter. One of them is basically these MEV extractors, these what are literally high frequency trading firms who figure out the best transactions to fit in the block.
That's got to be the proposers, right? Intuitively.
I think those are the builders. I think the proposers, those are the stakers.
Oh, okay.
Someone's going to tell me I'm wrong. I don't know. Whatever.
Whichever. Okay. So somebody says these are the transactions
they
we
separated
think you should do.
Yeah. So one group says, here's the transactions for the block. And the other group says, I'm just a staker or a miner, now staker. We're good.
Implement the block.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they take the highest bidder, right? So whoever is the best at extracting value, whoever can build the most cost-effective transactions and the best transactions that give them the most money, they can pay a little more, and they get to pick all the transactions for the block.
Flashbots like invented this idea? Is this a Flashbots idea?
I don't know if they invented it,
but they're
probably,
like they own
but
it.
They built the marketplace and whatever.
Okay,
they're not.
And they basically have like a monopoly on them. They like run this.
There
business.
are several other marketplaces, but they're basically by far and away the largest marketplace.
Okay.
And but they're not the most competitive block template builder. It's a high frequency trading firm. So there's only a few companies that can competitively build an Ethereum block, and one or two are just better than the rest.
And they're just like crazy quants, basically, essentially.
And they're experts. They spend all their time researching all of the different smart contracts, not just a few. They know more about everything going on chain than the next person. And so they're just a little better at it than everyone else. And you just have to be a little better, and then you get all the blocks.
And so this solution is working how well for Ethereum?
Yeah. I mean, it allows a small staker to participate, which is great. But in terms of transaction censorship and censorship resistance, it's gone terribly.
Okay. Does this
so like I think it's
censorship resistance in a substantial way?
So like 80 something, depending on when you look, it's been between 70 and 90% of Ethereum blocks are relayed through one of the Flashbots relays where they enforce sanctions compliance, U.S. sanctions list compliance on all the transactions in Ethereum.
Oh, so Flashbots, because these are like for-profit companies that can be regulated, essentially.
Yeah.
They enforce
sanctions compliance. And
no.
So because this has become so centralized, it's like, well, just one company has to decide, well, we're going to enforce this, and then
that could happen on Bitcoin without MEV, though, any moment.
It could, but it's really because it's so centralized and that you have so few entities.
How centralized do you think Bitcoin mining is, though? I mean, without MEV.
With pools, it's super centralized.
Right.
When you look at the actual miners, it's actually very decentralized. There's a lot of mid-sized miners out there
But
who own a few farms that are fairly large, but distributed all across the globe.
But we haven't like fully solved that problem. Like right now, we
No.
still like, the big miners today could totally implement OFAC compliance and whatever.
The big pools could totally do that.
But theoretically, we're fixing this issue.
Right. The big pools could do that. If the largest miners tried to do that, it probably wouldn't go very far.
But if you implement this like second layer, like middleware in the mining system, which is this Flashbots marketplace, that's like a MEV resistance tool that just it inserts another centralized company potentially that you're dealing with that could be regulated.
And most importantly to me, I've spent all this time on Stratum V2 and now there's this Ocean thing and we're kind of like starting to see early adoption and early sprouts around pools. And if then we get this MEV issue and now only the biggest pools can mine a competitive block template because they hire the best quants, now all of a sudden, all of that work is dead because no miner could possibly operate and say, I'm going to build my own block template. No, you can't. You have to go to the pool who has the best quants. And now it's not just like, okay, well, there's only a few pools and the miners pick between the few pools and they all have kind of similar pricing. Now it's, okay, well, that pool has the best quants, so we all want to mine on that pool.
Right.
And now it was already bad. It's made it worse. And it's also meant that the solutions we had that have been building that are just starting to maybe get adoption are totally impossible. We can't deploy that.
Is the reason why the Flashbots like company monopoly-esque or like oligopoly or whatever it is, like situation, is there a reason why like people can't really compete with them that much? And that like
there are a few other marketplaces,
it's
but
just
there's
like
not
race
a lot
to the bottom on fees
situation. There's not a lot of money in just the marketplace.
It's just fee race bottom issues.
And at the end, even if the marketplace were decentralized, well, you have like one or two companies who are actually selecting all the transactions. They would enforce sanctions compliance, so it doesn't.
It just doesn't even matter that much.
It doesn't save you. It's only by decentralizing the transaction construction that you can save yourself.
So let's just say like in a perfect world that we do have like decentralized pools like at like the highest level, as described earlier in this chat, and then MEV comes and we have to implement some system like that. I mean, is that essentially the proposal for Bitcoin? If BRC20 goes programmable, BRC20 goes crazy and, we have dexes all over Bitcoin meta protocols.
Yeah, I think hopefully not, right? Because that would totally. I mean, I think if we end up where Ethereum is today, we have lost basically. Like there was no point in this Bitcoin thing.
So Ethereum did not solve this problem in like a satisfactory way.
I mean, if it ends up the case that one or two companies can trivially censor someone from using Bitcoin, what was the point? The only reason Bitcoin has any value or anything, the only reason it does anything is because people can hold their own money and own their own money and not have to trust anyone else around their money. They can pay someone and no one can stop them. They can hold their money and no one can take it from them. They can, in many cases, they don't want to trust the Fed or maybe their local central bank. They want to have some other money available.
It's interesting
the case
because
that one company or two companies gets to decide like, no, you don't get to use Bitcoin anymore. Possibly because the U.S. government told them that, or just because, chain analysis told them that, or they decided that. What was the point? What have we built?
It's interesting because I think a lot of the technologies that are currently being built, like sort of like these kind of more expressive layer twos beyond Lightning, like the BitVM-style rollup, et cetera. Like the argument is we are making permissionless Bitcoin possible. We are actually making peer-to-peer money possible. Like Lightning isn't cutting it. But it also potentially introduces this challenge. Do you think people are thinking about that?
I mean, I think people, in most cases that I've spoken to people, they've said that, they think it's inevitable that someone's going to build this. And so Bitcoin has to figure it out, and Bitcoin's just going to have MEV, and maybe we'll have PBS or something, and that's how it's going to be. And I think that's not really an acceptable answer.
But it kind of makes sense to me. I mean, the truth of the matter is, how do you stop it?
Yeah, so I think, there's more research to be done.
We have to find an answer. Like, we have to find a solution because, like, I don't think you can stop the train of programmable Bitcoin coming.
Right. I don't think the answer is to say, like, no, you can't build that on Bitcoin, or, like, I mean, there's no way to even do that.
Exactly.
But, yeah, the answer isn't to say, no, we have to, like, somehow stop that or prevent people from using it or to discourage people from using it, whatever it is. The answer is we have to come up with something better than just the naive PBS
than the
that
Ethereum
did.
solution. Our solution to the problem has to be better than Ethereum solution.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So do you have ideas of what that might look like?
Yeah. So myself and a co-author of mine, Jay, wrote a paper that I presented about in Austin at BTC++ called MEVPool, which tries to be a slightly better version of PBS. We're not like excited about it, but it's a little better than the naive PBS. And really the key insight is just that PBS's failing was that they have to bid on whole blocks. The whole template, every transaction in the block comes from this marketplace, from one entity,
right,
and you accept it. And it doesn't have to be that way. You could say, actually, I'm going to pick and choose. And people can say, hey, here, I can collect the best MEV on this contract, and I want this group of transactions or transaction included in the block, and I'm willing to pay this amount. And only if it has these properties, it must be the first one in the block, or it has to be the first one that interacts with these contracts, whatever. But you can bid on just that, and you can have specialization in that MEV extraction game, or maybe it gets centralized. It doesn't really matter. And then the miner can look at that and say, this is great. Thanks for all these wonderful transactions. But also, I'm going to look at the public mempool. I'm going to look at the mempool that I have normally, and I'm going to just take whatever pays me the most across both of them. And I'm going to pick and choose between them, and I'm going to take, the first 5 here and the next 5 here, and then I'm going to build my block from that.
This seems like a really straightforward answer to this problem. Like, why hasn't Ethereum done this? It's like, why do you have to like bid on entire block templates when like you could just like pick and choose transactions? You'd probably make more money, right?
It's kind of hard in Ethereum.
It's just technically difficult.
It's technically hard in Ethereum because Ethereum has global state. So in Ethereum, you don't have this like UTXO where it's like, okay, I'm spending that transaction. It's like I'm interacting with a contract and I'm updating the global state of the entire blockchain. And this transaction went first, but then this transaction later in the block like failed because that transaction went first. And so it's a little more technically challenging to do this in like an EVM situation.
Wait, so this is like UTXOs for the win.
Kind of, yeah. I think there's an argument that this is going to get challenging in Bitcoin too, because a lot of the BRC and second layer rollup stuff might just import EVM onto Bitcoin.
But that's kind of the problem of the MEVILs, right? I mean, that's kind of their problem. Like, that's kind of the arbitrage. That's the arbitrageurs' challenge.
Right.
The security of the people who just care about securing Bitcoin will not have as many problems.
It does simplify it for us a little bit. And especially,
which is the important thing.
Right. And especially it really draws like no one has to worry about this transaction that is really just a transaction or a lightning close or whatever that's not interacting at all with this roll up. That can be totally separate and that there's no issue there.
Right.
Whereas in Ethereum, that gets more complicated.
Right. Like the people who are actually just like choosing, it's actually not that different than Bitcoin now. It's just like adding like a second layer of I pick my transactions based on the fees that are being proposed to me.
Yeah, you basically have a parallel mempool.
It's
logic,
a parallel mempool. Yeah. So, that seems like a great solution.
Yeah, it's still like, very centralized. You still have to have some kind of marketplace. So part of the problem is we need certain primitives that we can't have in like a normal public mempool.
Like you need somebody facilitating this exchange, this market.
Right.
And that could be like regulatorily captured or something.
It could be. We need properties for transaction bids, including things like here's a transaction I want included in a block, but only if the block gets mined in the next second. Right. So it's like I'm going to, maybe it's an arbitrage. Simple example, I want to arbitrage between Binance and on-chain DEXs. And I need
Do we need that, or is that just what the bidders want?
That's what the bidders are going to want.
But we don't need to give that to them,
well,
right?
I think if we don't give
we
them...
We won't be competitive.
We won't get paid. Yeah.
Okay,
and then someone will just build a naive PBS and they'll use that and they'll make more money doing
There will be pressure from just like a market's perspective to offer these kinds of like services.
Yeah, you need to be able to time out transactions. You need to be able to say this transaction has to be the first one in the block or whatever. And
that could spur competition for marketplaces for these.
Yeah, I think there will be competition for marketplaces, and hopefully that's a race to the bottom, and we get plenty of marketplaces. And so it's not entirely centralized, but it is a race to the bottom, so there's not much money in it, and maybe there won't be too many of them. And so there could be, the marketplaces could say, oh, this miner, I don't like this miner, so I'm gonna like kick them off the marketplace, and now they're not making any money, and now they go to
Right.
business.
No matter what, you're not going to have a ton of competition. There'll still be a small number. It'll be like an oligopoly or whatever of this, like these
Yeah, so there'll be
marketplaces.
some centralization there. Obviously, in an ideal world, we don't have any of this. We don't have these. There's probably a lot of centralization in who's bidding and doing the MEV extraction.
Mm.
Um, in an ideal world, that wouldn't happen either, but we can't get away from that,
It's so
certainly.
funny. Do you think in talking about this that Bitcoiners think that, do you think most of them are A, completely unaware, B, aware, but think that this is just like not going to happen anytime soon for technical reasons on the like programmable like front, or C, this could literally happen at any moment because who knows when the like next programmable meta protocol will
Yeah.
blow up?
I think most Bitcoin developers that I talk to, they know that there's like a risk here. They understand that, but they don't pay much attention to Ethereum, and so they're like, I don't know
Or
the
Bitcoin season
nuance
2, probably.
or that, and so they don't necessarily know the nuance of the risk,
Right.
and so they find it hard to like join and contribute to research ideas here. They find it hard to consider the weigh the risk. And then similarly, yeah, I think they pay some attention to Bitcoin season 2. They're aware of what's going on, but
Not in depth.
not in depth, and more importantly, not aware of what the adoption curve looks like, because that's really what matters, right? Like, okay, there are existing protocols that expose Bitcoin to substantial MEVIL. Yeah, those have existed for a long time. There's like rootstock. This has been around forever. It's a whole EVM chain. It could drive arbitrary MEVIL, but no one uses rootstock.
Right.
So, these things only matter insofar as they have a lot of usage.
Right.
And the Bitcoin season 2 stuff, some of it's coming soonish, some of
Well,
the
we don't really know.
meta
Yeah.
protocols, but in terms of adoption,
We don't,
like
yeah.
we don't know. It's
Yeah.
been, fits and starts a little bit for some meta protocols.
sure.
Maybe some of the BitVM bridges will get a little more adoption because they're more trustless and they can actually have Bitcoin the asset rather than like a bridged multi-sig Bitcoin or something.
Something we did see, though, or something that I guess makes me nervous about the timing question, is that we did see with ordinals, things can happen really fast.
Right.
Like,
That's true.
like it's not like, oh, this is going to be like a slow little uptick. Like,
Right.
you could have a situation where things are just like going bonkers in a really, really short period of time. And I think that's something for us to like be aware of.
Yeah, that's totally true.
Yeah.
But I think most people just don't feel equipped to address the problem. Is like, they don't pay attention to Ethereum. They don't know the ins and outs of what constitutes MEV, what creates a lot of MEV, how Ethereum is developed. And so they're like, yeah, I mean, we can improve the mempool, we can improve relay policy here in Bitcoin Core. And then beyond that, hopefully other people who are experts there, who do have the requisite knowledge, will do the work to figure it out.
Do you know anyone who's actually building something that could like support us here?
On the Bitcoin side, not much. There are a few companies doing private mempool who are doing private mempool technologies, who are interested in like, they don't want to just build a private mempool and then screw over Bitcoin. But they're not. But they're often research constrained. There's a few startups doing stuff, but
Right.
they're resource constrained, and there's not enough demand to do something complicated like this yet either. So
Makes sense.
yeah.
Really quickly, because I know we have like only a few minutes before you probably have to run, but did you want to chat really quickly about the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act?
Yeah. So we talked about Lightning and scaling Bitcoin and season 2 stuff, and one really big issue in the United States right now, or certainly for companies building in the United States or wanting to serve United States customers, is that all of this stuff has, I like to call them ancillary services. So, they're not purely decentralized systems in most cases. They have some node, they have some server that the wallet vendor or the author is operating to help the thing do its thing. Whether in Lightning, you often have Lightning service providers providing some liquidity. In season 2, you often have roll-up bridge operators. You have roll-up sequencers. in
would a
Arc, Spark,
federation
whatever.
multi-sig count in this situation?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
They're not necessarily custodians. Federation multisig is a little more custodial,
That's
but
more because I was going to say
just
that's
more
a
of a
gray area,
custodian.
I think.
But
Yeah.
certainly for the non-custodial things, there is this ancillary service. And we saw with the Samurai prosecution that the ancillary service can get targeted where they say, hey, look, yeah, you're a non-custodial wallet, but you operate this server that's helping the non-custodial wallet do its thing. And we think that that means you're a money transmitter, which in the United States means you need to do KYC, you need to do AML, you need to register with FinCEN or some state regulator, you need to do yearly examinations with your regulator to make sure your AML and KYC policies are up to par. All things that a non-custodial wallet can't do.
Right.
They have no control over who uses the system. They can't possibly implement a AML policy that's up to par according to the rules that you're going to have to pass. They couldn't do yearly examinations with FinCEN. Hell, FinCEN said that you didn't have to register, so they couldn't possibly have registered and done yearly examinations because FinCEN said you didn't have to register.
Right.
But even still, this administration under Trump has dropped some of those charges, not all of those charges.
Great.
Good improvement. I wouldn't call it great. It's
okay.
A good step.
Good step.
But the next administration can walk all that back. Anything the executive branch does can be undone in the next executive branch. And the pendulum always swings. It has swung one direction. It will swing the other direction.
Is there any way to make it more difficult for the pendulum to swing back? I guess you have to go
political reality, and we can't fix that. But we can fix the law. So the law is unclear. It was written for traditional finance. It was written in a world where the only way to transact was with intermediaries that were going to be regulated. And we can change the law and we can say, look, if you're not a custodian, this law that doesn't make sense, that you can't possibly actually do, you can't possibly comply with, does not apply to you. And so we need to do that. We need to get the law changed. So you mentioned explicitly the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act. It's a short 2-page bill that says exactly that. If you're not a custodian, you're not an MSB. You don't have to do any of that stuff. It doesn't.
And that would absolve. Do you think that would absolve federated sidechains or no?
Questionable. There may be more custodial-ish,
gray area.
Gray area.
Okay.
But it doesn't exempt full custodians, nor should it. If you're a custodian, you should be regulated as such, and it doesn't exempt you from all laws, right? It doesn't exempt you from sanctions violations. You still probably can't operate against someone who's got an IP address in Iran, right?
All right.
There are still rules. But the rules are actually things you could, in practice, comply with reasonably. They don't make it impossible to operate these things. And you can build a non-custodial wallet in the United States and serve United States customers. So we need to get this passed.
Okay.
So we put up a website, saveourwallets.org. We need people to call their congressperson. I know it's like a big ask. It takes 5 minutes. But you can go there, you can type in your zip code. We don't even log your zip code.
So calling your congressperson works.
It does.
It does. Okay.
It does. It's proof of work. You pick up the phone, you did the effort, and
if they get enough of them, they listen.
Yeah, and if they get enough, they listen. They recognize that, my constituents care about this, and especially if you make good arguments. I mean, you're talking to someone. Sometimes you're leaving a voicemail, but you're talking to someone, and they will listen to it. And they will hear what you have to say. And if you make
and they'll make a note and they'll make sure that their boss knows what you said.
Yeah. And so, go on the website, read a little about it, hear what we're,
what's the website? Where can people read about this?
SaveOurWallets.org.
What is it?
SaveOurWallets.org.
SaveOurWallets.org.
It's on the hat. So
it is on the hat.
You can pull it from the hat. You can pause the video and pull it from the hat.
Perfect.
And yeah, you type in your zip code, read the bill. It's super short. It's 2 pages. If you don't want to, you don't have to. You can just read the facts we have on the website too.
But this helps scaling services, you guys.
But pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. Do call. You have 2 senators and 1 congressperson. Pick up the phone if you're an American.
Right. Make sure the BitVM node operators don't go to jail, you guys.
Right. Yeah, we need it. Whether you want a roll-up operator or you want Lightning or you want Arc or Spark or
whatever,
base chain, DeFi front ends, all of these things have some ancillary service that can totally be targeted. And now that it's in the Overton window of how the anti-crypto faction in the US government is going to fight
Works.
crypto, they're going to try it again. And if they get any court victories there, maybe they won't, but they might. And if they do, we're all really screwed because we can't build any of this stuff in the United States. We certainly can't operate it from in the United States. And we can't offer it to Americans. We have to make sure that Americans can't use it, which, I mean, in many cases you can't do. In many cases, you can't build something that actually bans Americans in a useful way. In many cases, in order to ban Americans, you must first KYC, which was the whole point. We can't do that.
Right.
So yeah, it makes it really impossible in many cases for these things to get built. And even if you're not an American, tweet about it, send it to your American friends, because many other countries in the world will follow the US's path when it comes to regulation. That's
so true.
Fairly common. And even if not, there's a lot of developers in America who want to operate these things and build these things in the US, and they're going to be prevented from doing it. And that's going to slow things down a lot too.
Yeah, let's please not have like developer flight out of the United States. That would not be ideal.
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so saveourwallets.org? .org. Thank you so much for coming. This was like an awesome chat. By the way, I really enjoyed this. And I really think that there are going to be, I like to think that this podcast is like bringing like a few different like communities together to kind of like learn, things that they might not learn if they're in like their own little siloed, part of the world. So, and I think that we accomplished that today. So thank you, Matt. Thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me.